correctly, where I got sent home with a permission slip that requested parent to sign off on the new curriculum that was being introduced for the next 2 or 3 weeks or something. It was just like a small part. Our homeroom teacher was teaching it. It was sexual health education. And I mean, as a kid, I looked at that, and I lived in Burnaby right by Sussex Avenue. And I felt weird even saying that word, like Sussex. I don't know. I think growing up, I just had some notions where, these movies that we watched, there's some scenes that we would fast forward. There were some conversations that we just wouldn't have. And I think that had a lot to do with my parents just navigating life here. Because in that class of mine, there were only 3 or 4 other kids that were Desi. Their parents didn't sign the slip. So they were sitting outside during the session. And my mom did sign it. So I think a part of why she may have signed it, and I was because it was personal hygiene, where it was relating to me. Because I think the combination, at least when I'm approaching parents and trying to have this conversation now, through my role, it's the thought is that if you start teaching kids about this, they're going to go out and do it, and it's like, what is it? Some folks don't even want to say the word.
Welcome to another episode of TBH, To Be Honest with Natasha. Think about that time when you were a teenager. Chances are that you had questioned about your relationships, your love life, about sex, and you didn't know where to go. And now cut to a time travel, time capsule kind of thing where you are now a parent and you have kids and you're trying to figure out how to have this conversation with them, especially if they're teenagers, they're youth, they're young adults. How do you have this comfortable conversation about sex and sexual health with your kids? And to actually make this a whole lot more easier, I have 2 wonderful women with me today. And if I may say so, we're from 3 different generations. So we have with us the lovely, let's take with the youngest one, Yeshvi Mehta. She is the Gen Z of the 3 of us. She is the research coordinator at UBC School of Nursing. And welcome to the show, Yeshvi.
Thank you.
Then we have the millennial. Give it up for Mithila Karnik. She is the founder of the South Asian Collective Society in Port Coquitlam here in British Columbia, and she does a whole lot of work when it comes to the community, and she is a mother of a 6-year-old.
That's right.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then, of course, you have me, your host, Natasha Mendes, mother of some 20-somethings, just trying to say staying in this part of the world. So thank you for joining me, both of you lovely ladies.
Yeah, very excited to be here.
So let me start with Yeshvi. Yeshvi, let me, kind of put you in the spotlight here. What is Saravik all about? That is a part of the UBC program.
Saravik stands for Stigma and Resilience Among Vulnerable Youth Center. We're located in Vancouver, BC, and we're under the School of Nursing at UBC. Saravik is an international multidisciplinary research center, and we've been around for nearly 2 decades now. We study how stigma, discrimination, violence, and trauma affect young people's health and help develop, evaluate interventions to really foster resilience and health equity. I would say that a big part of what we do is collaborate with youth and their communities. Saravik develops culturally and contextually relevant interventions that not only improve the health outcomes, but also influence policies and practices worldwide.
You mentioned a whole lot of projects that are in the pipeline and are ongoing with, of course, Saravik. Saravik is a Stigma and Resilience Among Vulnerable Youth Center at the UBC School of Nursing. Now, this particular project that we're highlighting today, it's all about making it easier for parents to have this conversation with their children, with the youth, and we're talking about sexual health. But the difference is we're talking to newcomer parents and caregivers. So Yeshvi, would you want to tell me how did this idea come about? Why newcomer parents?
Yeah, I think a big part of the projects that we've been taking on recently have quite a bit to do with creating better access and lower barriers for migrant youth. And I think it's been almost two years that we've had a longstanding migrant youth advisory, and we turn to them quite often, every couple months, whenever there's some projects that do require a little bit more insight, a little bit more lived experience to bring the deeper insights to the numbers and the data that we do collect. And we consult with the BC Adolescent Health Survey, the BCAHS, which is run for kids grades 7 to 12. And the most recent one, I think that was 2023, and it runs every 5 years. So it'll happen again in about 2 years. So this survey, which captures a huge portion of youth all across BC, we are seeing a lot more migrant youth in this data
Yeah.
set, to the point where we can actually pinpoint different migrant groups. And we have about 10 groups that we've been able to just like not generalize, statements and data, and to be able to actually speak to experiences. And then a couple of the questions in the survey do ask about family connectedness, about belonging, and a lot of this data basically points to migrant youth not having the right resources within their homes.
Yeah.
So, in your experience, Yeshvi, or maybe Mithila could pipe in as well, what are the challenges, just to put it in real terms to give our listeners a perspective, that newcomers actually face when they come to Canada? Because culturally, we're so different. We all have come from different parts of the globe. So, Mithila, would you want to take that question?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you ask us that, Natasha, because just very recently, a couple of weeks ago, in fact, Yeshvi's organization was a part of a summit that I helped execute here in Port Coquitlam, where we had a lot of other organizations focusing on the South Asian diaspora, especially coming in to talk about the challenges and systemic barriers that newcomers, immigrants especially face. And one of the things that were highlighted was the fact that when it comes to accessing resources, there is such sheer lack of cultural nuance. Even language by itself is a barrier for people in need, especially newcomers in need. They may have a list of links to go to online in terms of, okay, this if this is what you need, here's where you need to go. But what's lacking in that communication is who is going to be there to speak with them. And when they go to access these resources, is there going to be somebody who understands their language? Is there going to be somebody who understands the culture or their background? For us, if we are talking specifically to, say, the South Asian diaspora, there is so much internal shame associated with accessing anything to do with sex, or with accessing anything to do with sexual health for that matter. So many topics related to it are still considered taboo. Even if you migrate to another country altogether, you are still found navigating those barriers. So I really believe the work that Yashvi's research and her organization is doing is clutter breaking, to the extent that when you bring nuance into the conversation, especially to do with culture, you are helping slowly but surely remove all those barriers that newcomers and migrant families are facing.
Okay, we're going to deviate a little bit from the workshop right here and just talk about our own personal experiences, if you may, if you'd like to. I mean, we all come from three not so far of generations and maybe from different backgrounds. We've all, made Canada our home. So, Mithila, and Yeshvi, just as a background, I've been in Canada for what, about 8 years now?
Yeah.
But prior to that, we've been traveling across, around the globe, and then we made Canada our home. So,
Yeah.
with 20-year-olds in my house, it has become, I think, just my job to have those conversations with them, to talk about sex, to make it that, it should be my responsibility that they get their information from me and not
Yeah.
from friends. which may
Yeah.
not be the best source of advice. But,
Yeah.
and Mithila, I know you have a long way to go. Yeshvi, who is, she's not going to be worried for a while now, but
Yeah.
how has your experience been, Mithila, even in your own life?
Yeah. I think for me it's been a little different, Natasha, simply because my daughter was born here. She was a proper pandemic baby. And I want to say, to my utter luck, I have found myself accessing support from mom groups where a majority of the population are either second or third generation Canadians. So the conversation and the knowledge and the experience that they have has really helped me navigate certain conversations, even at her age with my daughter. Even beginning to talk about private parts and what goes and what's acceptable, what isn't. And when you have a 6-year-old, conversations like, oh, but when I go to the doctor and I have to, they put the stethoscope on my chest, how is that okay? But how is it not okay if my friend wants to kind of touch me in the same space? So it's curiosity that fuels these conversations more than anything else. One of the things that I'm being very conscious about is the fact that we name private parts. There is no shame associated with calling a private part for what it is. So we use words like penis, we use words like vagina. When you stop these words from being said aloud, you are atrophying the value that you are meant to put to having safe conversations. So that's a rule in our family. A private part is named by what it is. And then, of course, with 6 year olds, there are just so many different, I want to say, situations to navigate. Why is this okay and why is that not okay? But we're both girls, so it should be okay. So it's tricky, it's interesting, but I like the fact that I feel supported in an environment where some of my friends have kids that are slightly older. It helps to have access to women who come from different backgrounds, because they have very different ways of kind of tackling. And when you club all these resources together, you just find that you are able to navigate your own life better sometimes as well.
And I think having this mommy hive in a way helps you feel comfortable discussing these things as well.
Yeah.
Yashvi, what has your experience been growing up? I mean, were you comfortable talking to your parents about sex, or was it like, there was a code word for it?
Honestly, I'm glad you asked because we came here. My parents moved here when I was 4, and then a couple years later, I had a little sister. It wasn't until I think grade 3, 4, or 5, if I remember correctly, where I got sent home with a permission slip that requested a parent to sign off on the new curriculum that was being introduced for the next 2 or 3 weeks or something. It was just like a small part. Our homeroom teacher was teaching it. It was sexual health education. And I mean, as a kid, I looked at that, and I lived in Burnaby right by Sussex Avenue. And I
Yeah.
felt weird even saying that word, like
Yeah.
Sussex. I
Yeah.
think I just never said. I was like, oh, I'm walking to that street, or. So I don't know. I think growing up, I just had some notions where, these movies that we watched, there were some scenes that we would fast forward. There were some conversations that we just wouldn't have.
Yeah.
And that had a lot to do with my parents just navigating life here as I was growing up. So I think it's nothing on them. It's just the space where I was. And I felt like these are just things that you don't talk about. And then just talking back about that permission slip, I remember when I brought that home, I didn't know how to present that to my parents. And I kind of didn't want to. So I remember leaving it on the table with a pen. Now shouting like, "Oh, there's something that needs to be signed," and then just going off to my room and pretending like nothing else. And I remember that being signed. I remember, I think later that evening, my mom waiting till I came out and was like, "Oh, this sheet," and she asked me if I had any questions about the sheet or what I knew off of the sheet. I think she also didn't know how to ask me, you know and I think there were 4 topics. There was like sexual intercourse, there was something else, and then there was
Yeah.
personal hygiene. And I think that was the safest one. I was like, I think I know about that, but I don't know the rest. And I'm pretty sure seeing personal hygiene on there, because in that class of mine, there were only 3 or 4 other kids that were Desi.
Yeah.
Two kids actually in that whole school, and mostly others were non people of color actually. And so I remember the other two kids, or two, three kids, they actually, their parents didn't sign the slip. So they were sitting outside during the session. And my mom did sign it. So I think a part of why she may have signed it, and I remember briefly having some conversation with her, was because it was personal hygiene, where it was relating to me, not because I think the common notion, at least when I'm approaching parents and trying to have this conversation now, through my role, it's the thought is that if you start teaching kids about this, they're going to go out and do it, and it's like, what is it? Some folks don't even want to say the words. And then I think I've had some parents tell me, again in this professional role of mine, some parents tell me to drop the word sex and sexual health and just call it health education, which of course I've had good conversations with them about too. But I hope that gives you a little insight in terms of like where I was and where I did come from. And then high school, I think, honestly, going to a tiny private school in Burnaby also did not help me further. It wasn't until university where I think I met a lot more folks. And I think at some point I took it upon myself where I was like, okay, I'm maybe wanting to get married at some time. So I don't want to be scared talking to boys. I think that was a thought at like 18, 19, 20, which I do feel like was pretty late of a thought.
Yeah.
I think for some people it was like that shouldn't be a thought at all, and until you are getting married or something. So yeah, a bit
And
of
it's right. And when we talk about sexual health, it goes beyond just, about having sex. It's a whole lot of other things.
Yeah.
So let's get right into what this workshop entails. How does this workshop look like? Yeshvi, you want to take that?
yes,
And
please.
then Mithila, you
Yeah.
can pipe in.
Oh, I cannot wait to have Mithila talk because, fortunately enough, I've
Yeah.
she was one of the first few people who I did approach with this workshop when I was trying to bring it to the South Asian community. Um, my own community, there's an individual space that I do feel like I belong in. They rejected the idea. They said, I don't think anyone's going to show up. I don't think anyone's comfortable. And so I said, okay, I'll approach you again later, maybe.
Yeah.
And so I'm fortunate in the last couple of weeks, this conversation and these workshops have really been coming around. We were initially running these workshops only till September 2026, but we just got renewed till September 2027. And so I think it just speaks volumes to what we can do with this workshop. And with the workshop, last year's summer is when we started a conversation with parents. We had two separate advisory groups. One that was, it just ended up being South Asian parents, and then another where we specifically had folks from Hong Kong, and mainly East Asian parents. So we did get a good understanding, at least at the start of it, what is the ethnic groups, what spaces are these conversations happening in or not happening in, and then why. And what we did learn is even just these two groups was that it's the same conversation, and the reason we're not having it. When we presented parents at these advisory sessions with a huge list, a 20-something list of topics that could be covered in these workshops, in these 2-hour one-off workshops. They identified top 5 topics, and they were gender and sexuality, rights and protections, sex and the law, more healthy relationships. There's a 5th topic which is slipping my mind right now. But the topic that was really exciting was healthy relationships. Parents themselves, if I were to quote a couple of the parents from this advisory, they said that it was something that they haven't seen themselves growing up, and they didn't know how to model it for their children. There were some parents that didn't know where to go if they had any questions. And genuinely, from this entire advisory, I think we learned that parents don't have these formal or informal support groups to even have these conversations. And so a big part of this might just be coming from potential lack of education, when you know that migrant parents are coming from all around the world. And just the fact that there's some words and some, not even words, just entire conversations that are skipped, or by teachers that aren't actually equipped to teach this. And then parents, of course, are not equipped to to have any sort of conversation with their kids. And then they enter a space where the language is completely different. Words are now given words, but they're also foreign and may sound, I think some words that I've heard is they're vulgar, which is very interesting. Um, yeah, not friendly in that way. And some people, some conversations that I've had with other community organization founders as well. So these are folks leading initiatives and well-being initiatives and things. And I've had hour-long conversations about apparently how they think this is not part of our culture. This conversation isn't our culture. So I'll pause there. But
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, Mithila, I know that you have hosted a couple of
Yeah.
these sessions, right? So,
Yeah.
in your personal interaction with parents, what is the kind of maybe top three roadblocks you find in initiating a conversation like this, especially with the youth of today?
So I'm going to answer this from the perspective that I have been on the receiving end of Yashvi's workshop, and I have had other, parents kind of be a part of it as well. So I've had the opportunity to watch her in action, but also really just absorb everything that the facilitator and other parents were kind of sharing as well. And I think one of the biggest roadblocks is just the sheer ignorance or the desire to consider this not important or something that can be dealt with when it happens, if it happens. But it's really funny how parents really don't understand that you don't have to be a certain age in some cases to experience a sexual act, right? And it's so important for younger ones now to understand what could be a sexual act, right? Sometimes there isn't the language, or there isn't enough conversation in the house for kids to feel that certain things are okay and certain things are not okay. So, in a situation when something that shouldn't happen happens, they don't turn to their parents. They try to either fix it themselves or figure it out by themselves, or they are then going and talking to their peers, and your peers are not the right people to help you navigate any kind of situation, right? So it's one of the biggest barriers is parents not being able to then establish that relationship of trust where your child needs to know and believe that if that you are their team at the end of the day, right? So there's one thing that me and my husband we keep telling our daughter is like, not your fault, not my fault, no one's fault. You still got to come and tell us. So it's the shame and the taboo associated with a lot of things is one of the biggest barriers that I feel the diaspora faces, and I want to say it's pretty similar in other newcomer and migrant communities as well. What do you think, Yashvi? I feel like there's so much overlap with the other communities too.
I'm glad you asked that. And if it's okay, because
Yeah.
Natasha, I'll just continue. When we started these parent workshops early December. We had about 15 people show up because we were hosting it with a very prominent community resource center. And we had three different languages going at the same time. That was our pilot session. So since then, we ran each session with different groups with specific languages, like identifying only one language per session, of course, and making it just more relevant in that way, more culturally relevant to be able to talk with you in your own community. But since I've been able to see so many different workshops, the conversation is quite literally the same. Parents are coming to educators with very similar questions. Very, very recently, I think maybe I'll say when we first again started with the sessions in different communities, we were having about like 4 or 5, I think 10
Yeah.
parents. And we didn't anticipate more than 10 to 15, knowing that this is a tough conversation and it does require a bit of an intimate setting.
Yeah.
Just last week, we had a session with Farsi speaking parents and guardians and caregivers, and we had 39 people at this session in person. And so it just speaks volumes to when you start. This was again our second session with the same Farsi speaking community. So you have to build this up. It's not something that will happen one off.
Yeah.
And this conversation needs to be ideally normalized in
Yeah.
these spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to speak to. there's a lot that I want to share, but my mind's racing. I feel like with parents and caregivers, just making it more broader and open, knowing that there's aunts and uncles, older siblings within
Yeah.
communities that do take care of younger children, youth, and
Yeah.
teens, and have influence on their decisions.
Yeah.
Equipping them all with this has been really, really important. So taking the burden
Absolutely.
off mom and dad, right, potentially, or potential single parents, and knowing that it does take a village, especially for our ethnic communities, and being able to invite the variety of folks into the space to have that conversation. And our educators do such a good job because they do teach kindergarten to university level. So
Yeah.
they are well equipped to answer any questions, to be able to tell you exactly what children are learning in school, so that at the end of these sessions, folks are feeling comfortable when their children, sorry, folks are feeling comfortable talking to their children, youth,
Yeah.
or when educators in schools and spaces are teaching
Yeah.
this subject, and they're not hindering that. I think with different communities, some words, just a big part has just been that words don't exist in different spaces, and then it's classified as a Western or
Yeah.
of of here, not
Yeah.
our culture, not our thing. And this just takes me kind of back to the advisory, because when we had a couple parents sitting and just being super, super vulnerable with us, um, they actually, one of them actually opened up about things that they themselves experienced, and they did not know what that meant. And this
Yeah.
is years later that they're recounting experiences, and being able to name things for what they are,
Yeah.
um, and also being able to say things that are potentially um, not acceptable or right, or maybe even offensive in other spaces,
Yeah.
because of what they've been taught. I think
Absolutely.
this is just like partially because of when we talk about gender and sexuality, and then there's some touchy conversations and topics, and one parent was able to share something that they've heard and they thought, and we were able to have a really good conversation and bring it to something better. um, if I remember, again, just being South Asian myself, when it was a South Asian parent conversation, there was a lot of conversation about what is right and what is wrong and what is this and
Yeah.
what is that. And I remember I was just supposed to take notes during the session, but I could not shut up. So I put my hand up and I was like, I have one thing to say. And I was like, how much of what you think is right and what you think is wrong has, who told you that?
Yeah.
If you think about it,
Yeah.
within our culture, within our ancestry and our heritage, colonialism, how much of that has affected and impacted what you think is right and wrong?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you could give us an example, Yashvi, I know I think I understand where you're going with those questions, or with that kind of the example that you set. Is it in a cultural context as to what is right, what is wrong? Because back home, there are so many things which are considered wrong, but here in the Canadian context, it's all
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right? So you could probably give us a few examples so our listeners as well understand what we're talking about, without, of course, naming names, right? But
No. I think just there's a lot of conversations about experiences and the variety of identities that folks can have, the experiences of folks, and it just speaks to the richness of who we are
Yeah.
and where we come from. And as someone who just traveled to Orissa last year, I've seen some beautiful temples and spaces where it is explicit, like to
Yeah.
the
yeah,
T. So I think it, it's surprising. Where did the shame come from? Where did the stigma come from?
Yeah.
Where did we have to cover up things like this? And who told us who could not exist and who could exist? Classifying those that are, and this might be a different conversation personally
yeah.
because of my own passions.
Mm.
I do feel like when you've been oppressed for so long in so many different ways and spaces, it takes a lot to speak up and just know that that actually wasn't it. And I know I didn't do a good job of going into the specifics, but I think if I can just potentially quote. I think it was one individual who said something like being trans is a defect. And we paused. We had a good conversation. That same individual emailed us later saying that they learned so much. They did not know this much before, and they did not know where they could access this information. And it isn't different from what we do know and what is in our ancestry. It's just that it's almost as if it's been erased and we were told
Yeah.
not right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was the colonization that did it,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, Mithila and Mithila, maybe you could answer
Yeah.
this one. What brings parents to come for these workshops? I mean, is it community organizations that say, hey, we have this thing happening, we have a workshop happening, come for it? Or are there reasons that parents actually want to come for a workshop like this?
I
Especially
think,
when Yeshvi, bringing it to your
yeah.
the thing you said, especially if their child is kind of going through whatever
Yeah.
gender identity, you know,
I
questions
think
and
the
things like
way
that.
the way I have always positioned the workshop, even the one that we just that we did towards the beginning of the year, was more to do with the fact that, do you want to be a parent who is able to give the right information to your kids and have meaningful conversations, or do you want your kids to access this information via Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, or whatever their Roblox chat room for for all you know. So, do you want to be the driving force of important conversations in your kids' lives, or would you rather just leave it to peers, to chance, to any kind of unforeseen conversations and whatnot? And I think that is a very big motivator for parents nowadays, for a couple of reasons. We are living in an age where information is literally at the tip of our fingertips, and not just for us, for our kids as well. We're living in the world of AI, where it is so easy to go down that slippery slope of, not just knowing what kind of information is going to get thrown at you or at your kids and whatnot. And at some point in time, you do want to be in control, but not negatively, of the situation as well, where there is that frank conversation where, I mean, yes, gender identity and all that, but something as basic as a dad being able to talk to his daughter about periods. There was taboo from where we came from. I mean, I can't imagine having a conversation with my dad about periods. It took a lot of time, but that first um, training, or understanding my body and whatnot, it came from my mom. But times are changing, and if parents need to have an even keeled relationship with their kids, moms and dads need to operate in tandem and not in silos. So the father figure needs to be as importantly ingrained in the kids' lives, just so they know that they have, not just the one parent, but another parent to basically go in and ask for help as well. So I think that has been a really big motivator in having parents show up, is where it's not it's not just about culture. Yes, it is, because we have that thread in common, but it's also about giving us the power to navigate the world that we are living in now as well, and being in control of the information seeking aspect, and being the ones giving the information, as opposed to the ones potentially then rectifying wrong information received by our kids.
I liked what you said about even the father being involved. So, one quick question, Mithila. Uh,
Yeah.
are there more moms or dads coming for these workshops?
I think we had one dad, Yashvi, the last time we did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really want to say it's slow, but what I can say is change really starts at home, right? So it's how we as mothers model that conversation and that responsibility as well. Because when I was, on that workshop with Yashvi, I made it a point that it was running on my computer as well as on my phone. So my husband, who was, in my vicinity, could hear things as well. And at one point in time, I saw him very rapt. Like, he was not on his phone. He was, not looking anywhere else, but he was listening. He was seated like this, and he's like nodding. So I knew that he was, absorbing information. And I find that in a lot of, parenting units that I'm seeing now, there are a percentage of us who are double income, just one kid, and that seems to be kind of the trend now, and it's so important to have that one-on-one relationship for each parent with their kids as well. That really is the driving force of every parent that I'm coming across to now. In fact, just a couple of days ago, I was at the Poco Heritage Museum, and we had Carol Todd come in for a talk. And I don't know if the two of you are familiar, but Carol Todd was mother to Amanda Todd, the 15-year-old girl who took her life in Port Coquitlam a few years ago because she was cyberbullied, she was sextorted, and it was so great to see people of all ages in that room coming to listen to Carol. In fact, there were grandparents as well who knew the importance of taking that screen away from their grandkids, because they were like, A, we don't know what is happening, what games they are playing, and B, we know that it is a threat to their self confidence, their sanity. So I feel it is so empowering to go into a world that is so technology focused, but to also have a certain set of people kind of in a way fighting against it as well. And I feel that ties in so beautifully with what Yeshvi and Saraf BC is trying to do, is just empower people to know everything there is in a way about everything that is related to our sexual health, our bodies, things that, like she said, are right versus wrong, and they're not necessarily wrong unless you approach them from a very thick cultural context or lens. And how do we break that lens, right? So it's such important work. It's really, I want to say, this is just the beginning, to be honest.
Yeshvi, and how important it is for community organizations like, of course, Mithila's South Asian Collective Society to be involved with a project like this.
I think a big part of these again organizations being able to approach so many, because again I have been. It takes a lot of buy-in from community organizations, so I am very fortunate to have support, have Mithila support, especially in the South Asian space. But this buy-in is really important because these conversations are just straddled with stigma, um, and if someone doesn't kind of champion this in these communities, then it just won't happen. And so CERVIC, as we are a research institute, we ourselves need to partner with community organizations to be able to bring it forward. So again, recently when I said we had 39 people at a session, that session actually had been delayed, and we finally managed to get a venue, and the venue ended up being Burnaby Neighborhood House, which had their own Farsi speaking community as well. So it took
Yeah,
another organization to really come together to have that number. So I mean, even two or three people showing up is valuable. And if we're talking about just I think talking about who shows up to these sessions, we had a session in Gujarati, and we had just two dads show up to that session. So I mean, we're fortunate to be able to go into these various communities and reach the people we do because of community organizations like Mithila.
I love that. Just hearing that there were two Guju dads there for their children, it fills my heart with so much joy. And that is what we want. And this is a conversation we're having, these difficult conversations which we are like saying, talking behind hushed doors. But we want to bring it out in the open because it's so important for our kids to be in that safe space where they can feel that it is safe enough to talk to their parents and not just go out and get information. And you did mention Amanda Todd, Mithila. It is another reminder why we need
yeah,
to have these conversations with our
absolutely.
kids, right, in a
Absolutely.
safe
Yes.
environment. We're running out of time, but very quickly, Mithila, if you can just give us a rundown of how a workshop looks like.
We are offering this online and in person across Canada. It is 1 hour. I'm sorry, it's one session that's 2 hours
Yeah.
long. We've got topics like consent, gender and sexuality, rights and protections, sex and the law, and healthy relationships. Again, brought together with parents, by parents, for parents. And these topics are covered over the course of these 2 hours. There's a lot of space for discussion and conversation and questions. Our educators are also coming from Options for Sexual Health, which is known in BC and also across Canada as Planned Parenthood. So these are certified sexual health educators, where this is their topic of expertise. They teach kindergarten to university level, and they teach a variety of modes. And we are hoping we've got a good team so far, and we've got some folks coming from different backgrounds, so we can speak to different cultures and communities. But the added portion of this session is where we're really making it culturally relevant is by having an interpreter from the community speak to it. So if it's a Hindi speaking organization, we would have someone either from the community or we would hire ourselves and have someone talking Hindi alongside the educator. And because we know that this is still a conversation, it's not like information being shoved down anyone's throat. This is still a conversation. We're all still learning about this in that cultural context. And so at the end of this workshop, we do have a little feedback survey that we're asking anyone who's participated to give us some feedback, to tell us what could be improved, to tell us what is good. And we're taking this, of course, over the course of the next year. And something that we're also doing, as I mentioned, the different groups that we've been able to identify through this adolescent health survey is not just South Asian, not just general ethnic groups or migrant groups, but actually say this is a South Asian. These are data points specifically from South Asian youth and East Asian youth, African youth, Caribbean youth. We've got about 10, 12 different infographics that we're creating for these each individual groups and communities. And so making it more culturally relevant, making it, I mean, the data isn't much different from all these groups, but being seen, being represented is super, super important. And that's a big part of what we're doing.
And I think language is one important part of the whole thing when you're addressing different groups, right? I mean, we all parents are, there is this one thread that unites all parents with the angst of parenthood. But of course, language is the only way where we can, reach out to them. And also, of course, certain cultural differences, which may be, stark in some countries and not so much in others. Now, if our listeners want to get involved, how can they do so? Our viewers, if they want to get involved, find out more about what Saravik does, find out more about this particular workshop, Yeshvi, where do they go?
Absolutely. So on Instagram, we're saravik.ubc. My direct email is yeshvi.mehta@ubc.ca. If you do visit saravik.ca, that's where you can find a little bit more contact information. A big part of our work, again, which just speaks to why community organizations are super important, is because we actually don't host any of our active workshops online. We rely on community spaces where folks already have the sense of trust and belonging to be able to help us spread the word. And so if this is something that you'd like to bring to your community, to your space, if there's an organization that'd be willing to help, if it's just an individual, because actually we do have just one Latin American mom who has decided to bring this to her whole community. And we're going into our third session with her only. So there's no community backing. There's just one mom making waves with this conversation. So it doesn't have to be a huge platform that you are coming to us with. But the idea is that we don't post this on our socials and anywhere online to really keep this a safe space, because we actually don't do so much community facing things. We provide more so evidence based research and stuff in policy spaces and in government and academia. And so bringing this out through community organizations is what we hope to do. To reach us, I just briefly mentioned my email and the website and the Instagram. So wherever it is, if you'd like to get in touch, that'd be awesome. And then we can have a bit more conversation about what the details are and to be able to really tailor it to the folks that are coming through. So if we've had sessions with just a group of moms, we've had sessions with just a specific language group. Lots of different sessions that we can be able to create and make happen. It just depends on what the community needs. And so I'd encourage you all to reach out and we can have the conversation going.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies, for your time and for your insightful conversation as well. I wish you all the best in the work that you do, reaching out to newcomer parents and caregivers, making it easier for them to have the conversation about sexual health with their youth and to keep up with the good work. And of course, we will be in our bio we will be sharing what your where can people connect with you as well. So Yeshvi Mehta, research coordinator, UBC School of Nursing, and Mithila Karnik, who is the founder of South Asian Collective Society in Port Coquitlam. It was wonderful chatting with you right here on TBH, to be honest, with Natasha.
It was so great meeting you, Natasha and Yashvi. Thank you for including me in this conversation.
I'm so glad to have you. I think your experience and just being so open to having this conversation as a mom has been so valuable. It sets a really good role model and precedence for what we should be doing with the
Thank you.
platform that we have.
And this is just one of the many conversations we will have, Yeshvi. I hope to have you again on the show. And of course, you will be, linking me with some other great minds who will add so much more insight into this topic of how do we talk with our children about their sexual health, about sex, and a whole lot more. So thank you once again.
Thank
Thank you
you.
both. Thanks.
And that's it for this edition of TBH. To be honest with Natasha, we were in conversation with Yeshvi Mehta, research coordinator at UBC School of Nursing, as well as Mithila Karnik, who's the founder of the South Asian Collective Society in Port Coquitlam here in British Columbia. We were talking about Saravik and the project that they have where they train newcomer families and teach them more about how to have these conversations about sexual health with their children, especially the youth. If any of this resonated with you, if you want to connect with them, even if you are not in Canada, do reach out to Yeshvi Mehta. She is here to direct you to the right resources. She may help you conduct a workshop for you wherever you are. So do connect with her. And if you are a community organization and you want to have something like this for the youth in your community, for the parents, the newcomer parents in your community, do reach out to the wonderful ladies, especially Yeshvi Mehta is a person to reach out to, she's the research coordinator of this project. That's it from me, Natasha Mendes. This is TBH, to be honest with Natasha. Real conversations with real people. Bye-bye.